Simon & Schuster Audioworks presents Star Trek: The Next Generation, Imzadi by Peter David, read by Jonathan Frakes.
A gentle, eerie howling was in the air, which seemed to be permeated with the haunting and lonely cries of souls that had existed or might never exist, or might be in some state of limbo in between. In the distance was the city. Its name was unknown and would forever remain so. There was a man in a greenish-yellow shirt whose mind was elsewhere and elsewhen. Behind him stood his friends, his crew. They waited patiently. Finally, he turned and addressed them. "Let's get the hell out of here." The words hung there for a moment, startling in their vehemence. The crew took several small steps closer to each other. It was partly reflex to make sure they would be within range of the transporter effect. But there was something else this time. It was an unspoken desire to try to lend support by dint of the fact that they were there for him. They did not yet know the sacrifices their captain had made, did not know that, in the best tradition of romance, he had found a part of his soul existing in a woman and had been drawn to her. And then he had lost that part, which he hadn't fully realized he was missing in the first place. There was a difference that the crew sensed this time in their captain. Many a time had he been battered, but as the old saying went, battered but unbowed. This time, though, he was bowed. They got the hell out of there, and Commodore Data watched them go. Across the compound, Mary Mac headed in the direction of Commodore Data. Mary Mac's skin was green, as was standard for an Orion woman. Her long, jet-black hair was delicately and elaborately braided. Most incredibly, she wore glasses. All of it was designed to try and downplay the widely held belief that all Orion women were nothing but animalistic sex kittens. Her look had gotten her quite far because people would always wait for her to revert to type. But she never did, for she had trained herself too long. As a result, she was always a bit of a surprise, and people love surprises. Which was why Mary Mac had worked her way up through the ranks and eventually landed the assignment of project administrator on Forever World. The planet did not have an official name. Somehow it seemed presumptuous for any mere mortal to give it one, so it had simply been nicknamed Forever World, and that was what had stuck. The gravel crunched under her boots as she got to the other side of the compound. There were two constants on the Forever World. One was the steady, mournful sigh of the wind, and the other was the presence of the guardian of forever. At this particular moment, the legendary time portal had finished yet another run-through of a particular era. It was now silent, displaying nothing. A screen for slower, delayed showings was set up next to the Guardian. Playing out on that screen now was a scene very familiar to Mary Mac. Data stood there, his back to Mary Mac, hands draped just below the base of his spine. As Mary Mac stepped closer, she heard a familiar voice, a voice filled with resolve and yet hidden trauma. "Let's get the hell out of here." Mary Mac smiled and called out to Data. "Well, that certainly figures." Data turned and looked at her, his face calm and composed as always, his gold skin glittering in the half-light. "I beg your pardon." She pointed at the Guardian. "That moment, it's one of the most popular. Everyone wants to see the moment when James Kirk came back through time, when he had to let Edith Keeler die so that time could be restored to its normal flow." Commodore Data, the commander of the USS Enterprise, registry number 1701-F, stared at the Guardian for a long moment, then stepped back. Mary Mac watched Data walk away. "We'd be honored, Commodore, if you'd join us for dinner up at the compound." "Very well. First, I'll contact the Enterprise." Mary Mac looked skyward as if she could see the great starship. What's she like, Commodore? The Enterprise, I mean. You served on an earlier Enterprise, didn't you? Yes, I did. And in many ways, the Enterprise 1701F is similar to the 1701D from 45 years ago. But as fulfilling as my current command might be, I still dwell on those early days and my first companions. Some are dead, some are retired, some are still active. It's a large galaxy and not always easy to keep apprised, but there is one who got his current assignment 3 years ago and hasn't moved from that spot. That would, of course, be Admiral Riker. Starbase 86 was far removed from the more frequently traveled space lanes. Visitors were rare. The facilities were not top of the line, they were simply good enough. Once upon a time, the commanding officer of Starbase 86 lived by the axiom of good enough never is. But that was a lifetime ago, someone else's lifetime. Admiral Riker, commanding officer of Starbase 86, stared out the viewport of his office, watching the lights of stars that, because of the time it took for light to travel, might have already died years ago. He spoke out loud to himself. Sometimes, seeing isn't believing. Admiral? Admiral Riker, are you okay? Come in, Lieutenant Dexter. The lieutenant entered, looking apprehensive, as he always did. Did I catch you at a bad time, Admiral? Lieutenant, I have nothing but time. Dexter began to natter on about upcoming matters to be attended to. The surveying ship Chance would be coming in for minor repairs the next week. Starfleet was complaining about the speed, or lack thereof, of paperwork being processed. Riker's head settled into his wrinkled hands. His gray beard felt brittle against his palm. Is there anything else, Lieutenant? There's one other thing, Admiral. A communique for you from Beta Z. It was of a personal nature, and I'd never dream... Riker cut him off with a curt gesture. Of course you dream, Dexter. You've got your skinny fingers in every pie in this part of the galaxy. It's from her, isn't it? Is she all right? No, sir. She's dying, sir. And she's calling for you. He saw Riker's expression, the face of someone who had spent half his life feeling haunted. Make the arrangements. On occasion, Riker had spoken of his past to Dexter, and the lieutenant knew how difficult this was going to be for the Admiral, so he tried to put as positive a light on it as possible. You know, Admiral, it's possible that she wants to settle loose ends, close accounts. It's possible, sir, that she wants to forgive you. Riker looked at him with grim amusement. Now, why should she want to do that, Lieutenant, when I haven't forgiven myself? The structures in which the scientists of the Forever World lived were, at best, functional. Data looked around the table that served as the communal eating place for the scientists. The 6 scientists grouped around the table ate quietly, with talk at a minimum. Data had brought down his science officer, Blair, to join them. Blair was a head taller than Data, and covered with thick brown fur. His jaw jutted out, and his eyes were so small that they were almost impossible to spot. Data glanced around the table, and then turned to Mary Mac. My records indicate there were 7 of you. There were. We had a recent defection, Marlock. He took off the other day. Haven't seen him since. To be honest, we lose people all the time. You have the constant wind, the solitude. And with the Guardian out there, you feel like you're staring into a mirror from hell. and it's only so long before you see something staring back at you. Blair looked at Mary Mack with curiosity. What precisely do you scientists do here? We make observations, Lieutenant Blair, on history, society. We draw conclusions not only about the past and the present, but also the future. Tell me, Commodore Data, what conclusions did you draw from your chat with the Guardian? It would seem to confirm, Miss Mack, on the face of it, that which we had always known, that time is fluid. There is, however, another interpretation. All times coexist, either as parallel universes or even alternative time tracks. Actually, Commodore, it's interesting that you should mention that. I have something to show you along those lines. One of the Guardian's playbacks has revealed an intriguing turn of events. I think you'll find it very interesting. Riker stood outside the Troy family mansion on Beta Z. Captain Wesley Crusher, commander of the USS Hood, had accompanied him. Despite all the years that had passed, every angle of the house, every aspect, had been forever etched into Riker's memory. Tall and graceful, it was constructed so that the upper stories seemed almost to touch the sky. They knocked at the door and waited silently. And now it opened to reveal the always imposing form of the manservant, Mr. Holm. And then the towering Mr. Holm did something totally unexpected, something that to Riker's knowledge he had only done once before. He spoke. "She's waiting." Riker headed slowly up the long, winding steps. Part of him wanted to run from the house, but his mind ordered him, "Damn it, Riker, be a man, for crying out loud." He entered the bedroom from which the sound of slow, barely perceptible breathing emerged. Loxana Troy lay on the bed. Her skin was taut, her lips and hair the same parched white color. Her eyes were closed. Riker approached the bed and sat on the edge. Crusher and Mr. Holm kept a respectful distance. Riker was certain she didn't even know he was there. He leaned over to kiss her on the forehead. "Loxana, I'm sorry." Suddenly, her withered, claw-like hand shot upward and grabbed him by the throat. Riker gasped, the noise partly cut off by the hand that was closing on his vocal cords. Loxana's eyes were opened and blazing with pure, unbridled hatred. Her voice was cracked and aged, but filled with a vitality that would not be daunted by such trivialities as death. And when she spoke, it was as if she were spitting out a curse. "It's your fault. You should have saved her. She asked you, she begged you. You were Imzadi, and you let her die. You let it happen, and I hope you burn in hell. It's your fault!" Crusher tore Loxana's hands loose from Riker's throat and pulled the Admiral away. Riker was gagging, but through the pain and mortification, he still managed to gasp out a few words. "It wasn't. I did everything I could. You have to understand, it wasn't my fault, Loxana. It happened too fast. But it was too late. Loxana's head had slumped back onto her pillow. Her eyes were still wide open, but there was no light in them. Her hand was still in its claw-like grip, frozen in its final gesture. Wesley Crusher reached over, passing his hand over her eyes, and closed them. Riker addressed her one last time. "It wasn't my fault. Loxana, I did everything I could." But he didn't believe it any more than she had. The funeral had been surprisingly simple. Considering the larger-than-life manner in which Lwaxana had lived her life, Riker had somehow expected a death that was, well, larger than death. Long after the others had left, Riker was left standing there, staring at Lwaxana's body in its clear, sealed entombment. As he turned to head for the door, a sudden storm cut loose. Lightning ribboned across the sky, and rain began to fall in blinding cascades. He stepped back into the mausoleum, turned, and looked at Lwaxana.
You arranged this, didn't you? You're up there less than 12 hours, and already you're telling them how to run things.
Lwaxana made no reply. The thunder did it for her.
All right. I know what you want me to see.
He walked into the next room, and there she was. In her clear encasement, perfectly preserved, Deanna was even more beautiful than his memory of her. The black hair still thick and full, the perfect lips formed into a small, round O shape. But no amount of preservation could put the warmth back into the soft skin, breathe the life back into her, open the eyes, and pull the soul back into place. She could not open that lovely mouth and say, "Will!" Riker jumped 3 feet in the air, letting out a yell of shock. He turned to face an equally startled Captain Wesley Crusher. "I'm sorry, Admiral. Did I startle you?"
Wes, where in the hell did you come from?
"Out there. I beamed down after the funeral was over. I wanted to know if you're ready to leave."
Oh, I'm ready. But Lwaxana's will stipulated that I was to go through her memorabilia and catalog it. Ostensibly, I'm the best qualified, but actually, she wants me to relive it all. She wanted one last opportunity to put me through what she's put herself through all these years, and you know what? I owe it to her. I owe her something.
Crusher stared for a long moment at Deanna's unmoving body. "You know, Admiral, I have to admit, I had a kind of crush on her, but I was just a kid. I remember that blue-green outfit she wore sometimes. That was my favorite."
Yeah, it was mine too, Wes. Every so often, when I was feeling frivolous, I'd put it on. I'd romp around the holodeck.
Crusher stared in shock at Riker's deadpan expression.
I'm kidding, Wesley.
"Oh, You gave me kind of a strange mental picture there for a second. How did it happen, Admiral? How did she die?" "Mom could never bring herself to talk to me about it. I was at the academy doing my extra year. I was too stunned even to cry when I heard the news. I just sat there in my quarters saying, why? Why?" Riker walked toward the door and stepped just outside, allowing the rain to spatter on his face. The thunder cracked once more.
I have no answers for you, Wesley. None. But if you want to know what happened, I'll tell you. You're entitled to that. God knows we all are.
As if it were an old-fashioned campfire, or perhaps stories being traded in a haunted house, Admiral William Riker sat on the floor of the mausoleum and, holding nothing back, spoke to Wesley Crusher of those last days with Deanna Troi. It was 45 years earlier. The Enterprise NCC 1701D had been chosen to be the site of an important peace conference. After decades of warfare, the Sindarine, with their economy collapsing, had sued for peace. They had approached their nearest neighbors, the races that they had preyed on for so long, the Cordians, the Bifrexians, and the Lust, and requested the opening of peace talks. The Enterprise had already picked up representatives from those three races and was now en route to the home planet of the Sindarine, where their delegation would board and the peace talks would get underway. Captain Picard anticipated that Counselor Troy's contribution to the proceedings would be invaluable. Her empathic abilities would be able to determine whether or not the Sindarine were sincere in their bid for peace. The drawback for the counselor was that the Sindarine were not always easy to read. Their natural aggression could screen her empathic talents to some degree. But if she were with individual members of the Sindarine long enough, she could eventually punch through their resistance and get a very clear feeling for them. All of this was on Commander Riker's mind as he went to Deanna's quarters to consult with her on the upcoming peace conference. He walked up to the door of her quarters and rang the chime. At first, there was no response, and for some reason, he became worried. "Deanna, are you all right? It's Will." The door slid open, and Deanna was standing there wrapped in a gold dressing gown that hung half off her bare shoulder. She appeared slightly out of breath. "Deanna, is everything okay? I wanted to talk to you about..." Then he saw him. A man, a member of the Luss delegation, seated on the bed. He was clearly naked, holding a pillow in his lap. Riker waited for the 16-ton weight that he was sure would momentarily land squarely on his head. "Oh, sorry, Deanna, you're busy." "I was, Commander." "Will Riker, this is Dan Lendon, aide to the ambassador of the Luss. Dan is an old friend. Dan, this is Commander Riker." "I remember the commander. He welcomed us aboard." "Yes, I did, although not as enthusiastically as Counselor Troy here apparently did." "Well, I'll just be going. Good seeing you, Dan. I mean, not that I expected to see this much of you." Riker backed out into the hallway, and the door closed with a very decisive hiss. He leaned against the wall of the corridor. Perfect. Just perfect. Some hours later, when Deanna Troy finally found William Riker, he was camped out at his usual table in 10 forward. She dropped down into the chair opposite him and waited for him to speak. I'm so sorry, Deanna. Walking in on someone when they're involved with someone can be very disconcerting. And it's even more disconcerting when that person is someone you have feelings for, feelings that you always think you've sorted out, but you never really have. You know, actually, I had this weird feeling of reverse deja vu, because if you remember, you didn't handle it particularly well on Beta Z when... She stopped him quickly with a wave of her hand. "Youth excuses a great deal, Commander." But then she smiled, understandingly. "Will, we have a lot of history between us. A lot of good reasons why our relationship is where it is." "Right, Counselor. And naturally, we're going to be involved with other people." "You understand that intellectually, Will. But what about when you're put face to face with the reality of it?" "I guess, Deanna, it catches me a little off guard and makes me feel just a smidgen of jealousy. Oh, nothing significant, and I truly want you to be happy. You're entitled to every happiness life has to offer you. I guess my problem is that I'm only human." "That's true, Commander. But I've tried never to hold that against you." It was night. Riker lay on his back, staring up into the darkness of his quarters, reflecting on how the day had gone. The Sindarine delegation had been brought aboard. A tall, elegant-looking woman named Nitsi, and her aide, Asa, who was smaller, nastier-looking, and seemed to keep staring at Deanna from the corner of his eye. There had been a dinner reception that had a general level of quiet tension, but everyone had gotten through it without an incident. His hands were interlaced behind his head, the pillow soft under him. He had been that way for over an hour as sleep refused to come. Sorting out his feelings for Deanna was rapidly becoming something of a royal pain. Perhaps they'd been kidding themselves. Here he was, someone accustomed to command situations, and she was someone who was always in touch with her feelings. So naturally, they thought they could control their feelings and dictate their relationship. Turn their emotions on and off like an old-style light switch. But how realistic was that? He pictured her lying in her quarters, wrapped in Dan's arms. And then something made him sit bolt upright in bed. Someone was there, hiding in a corner, lurking in the darkness. Lights! Obediently, his quarters filled with light, and there he saw nothing unusual. After a moment, he shut the lights off, lay back, and slowly drifted off to sleep.
Imzadi!
The words screamed in his head, and he snapped, fully awake. Deanna's voice had screamed in his mind. Something utterly terrifying was happening to her. Riker to Counselor Troy. No response. He yanked on a robe as he contacted Dr. Crusher and ordered her to send a med unit to Deanna's quarters immediately. Then he raced to Deanna's quarters, entered, and was horrified by the sight that greeted his eyes. Deanna was lying on the floor, nude but wrapped in a sheet, convulsions shaking her. Dan was standing over her, looking confused and helpless. Riker dropped to her side. Her skin was dead white. Her hands were clammy as he held them. Riker to sickbay. Where the hell's that med unit? Shh, Deanna. Everything's going to be okay. It's okay, Deanna. Her eyes were clouding over. He didn't even think she could see him. Imzadi, please, help me. Riker took her in his arms and was out the door, heading toward sickbay. He encountered the med unit part way, Beverly Crusher guiding the anti-grav crash cart. He laid Deanna down on the cart and ran alongside it, her hand still gripping her robe as they ran toward sickbay. Help me, please. So cold. The fear that ran through Deanna leaped into Riker and clamped around his heart. He felt as if his world were disintegrating. I'll help you. I promise, Imzadi, I'll do anything, everything. She didn't hear him. Her breath rattled once more in her chest, and by the time she was rolled into sickbay mere moments later, she was gone. Thousands of light years away, Roxana Troy woke up, and she began screaming. She did not stop for 2 solid hours. She was never the same after that. Captain Wesley Crusher stood in the mausoleum and stared out at the rain, which had tapered off to a mere trickle. And Mom never found the cause. Admiral Riker shook his head.
Massive cardiovascular collapse.
But there seemed no physiological reason for it. Deanna just died. At that moment, Crusher received a call from the hood. As he spoke with his ship, Riker walked back into the room where Deanna's body lay in state and rested a hand on the covering.
I'm sorry, Imzadi. I tried.
There was, of course, no response. Many had been the time over the years when he'd called out that word in his mind, but never had a reply come. He heard Wesley's soft footfall behind him. I have to go, Admiral. Sudden ground quake on Signia 3. If you'd like, I'll walk you back to the house.
I'll be fine, Wes.
Impulsively, Riker embraced the younger officer, patting him on the back.
Good sailing, Captain Crusher.
And good luck in your future endeavors, Admiral Riker. I hope you find happiness and some peace. Crusher to Hood, one to beam up. Wesley Crusher's body shimmered out, and Riker was alone. Beta Z had an excellent museum of antiquities, and Waxana Troy's collection was going to be a considerable and valuable addition. Riker had spent hours going through it all, cataloging and marking it. He had even found the holy rings of Beta Z, which, for no reason he could determine, had been stuck in Waxana's closet. Riker had informed the authorities that he would shortly be ready to leave. Already a ship had been dispatched that would pick him up. He had found it grimly amusing to learn that it would be the Enterprise commanded by Commodore Data. After spending all this time dwelling on the past, somehow it seemed only appropriate. Having gone through all the other rooms in the house, he now approached the one he'd least looked forward to, Deanna's. It was exactly what he had anticipated. The Waxana had left everything just as it was, like a shrine. And in Deanna's closet, he found a box. He recognized everything in it. It had all been perfectly preserved, no matter how arcane or trivial. There was a piece of vine from the Jalara jungle. There was the headband she'd worn at Chandra's wedding. There was a small but sharp rock stained with blood. And then he found the poem he'd written, decades earlier, in youthful exuberance. He read it over.
This is terrible. I can't believe I wrote this.
He picked up the headband, fingering it.
And I can't believe you liked it. I can't believe you...
He was surprised to find that his face was wet. He wiped the tears with the headband, feeling the softness of it against his face. He had thought he'd finished with the grief, but he'd been wrong. He clutched the headband even tighter, the tears streaming down his face, and remembered back to a time when he had been a young lieutenant, junior grade, newly assigned to Beta Z. A time when he had felt no pain. Mark Roper, the man who headed the Federation embassy on Beta Z, was heavy-set, with graying hair, and a thick red nose. He looked up impatiently at the young lieutenant standing in the doorway of his office. The lieutenant's name was William Riker. Mark Roper didn't know that, nor did he seem to care.
You say you're Lieutenant Riker? When was our appointment?
Appointment? No, Mr. Roper, I'm the new Starfleet liaison. Actually, I'm supposed to be the new first officer on the USS Hood, but she was damaged in combat before I got there, so I was assigned here while she's in dry dock for repairs. They didn't tell you I was coming.
You're Riker. William Riker? Of course, my boy. Please accept my apologies. Sit. As you can see by my perpetually discombobulated state, the more help we have here, the better. So, what have they told you about this assignment?
Well, Beta Z is a long-standing Federation ally and quite valued. I also understand there have been some recent difficulties with the Sindarine.
Quite correct, Lieutenant. There have been 3 attacks in as many months now. A squad of Starfleet security has been stationed here. As the ranking Starfleet officer, you'll be in charge. We'd like to see these raiders disposed of.
Anything else I should know, Mr. Roper?
Yes. Remember that on Beta Z, everyone knows what's going through your mind. Be straightforward and honest with them, and they'll appreciate and respect you for it.
A young, cheery-eyed woman with straight black hair and a bit of the devil in her eye flounced into the office. Hello, Daddy.
Lieutenant, this is my daughter, Wendy. Wendy, this is William Riker.
She studied the young lieutenant for a moment. You're cute. I like your eyes.
Wendy, darling, was there something in particular you wanted to discuss?
Yes, I wanted to know, which do you think would be better to wear to the Zirk's wedding tonight? The blue dress with the ruffles or the green dress that's cut low? Roper looked at Riker with clear irritation.
Yet another of the social engagements this office is expected to participate in. Chandra Zirks of the Third House of Beta Z is getting married tonight. The Federation is to send a representative. Guess who? Except I have to meet with a caterer now at the same time to pull together a reception.
Mr. Roper, if it's too much of an inconvenience for you, I have a simple solution. I'll go instead.
Would you, Lieutenant? That'd be great, if Wendy doesn't mind.
Wendy looked Riker up and down appraisingly and smiled. That sounds great. I look forward to seeing the lieutenant there. It was a cool, crisp evening as Riker escorted Wendy Roper, who had decided on the low-cut green dress, to the Betazoid wedding. Riker and Wendy entered the chapel, which was fairly plain, although inscriptions written in Betazoid lined parts of the wall. There were also recesses along the side, and clothes hangers dangled from them. Riker wondered what they were for. A thin but pleasant-looking Betazoid man approached them.
Welcome. I'm Gart Zerks, the father of the bride. They should be ready to start in just a moment. Chandra's quite nervous. She wants everything about her appearance to be perfect.
Riker nodded understandingly. I know how it is. The bride wants to make sure the dress looks just right. The edges of Zerks's mouth turned upward slightly.
You don't know, do you? Know what?
At that moment, the doors to the inner chapel opened. It was dazzling, filled with flowers, exotic and tropical. To the side was a small waterfall. Riker turned back to Gart Zerks to compliment him on the arrangement and was astounded to see that Zerks had removed his shirt. Confused, he turned to Wendy to see her reaction. What he saw was Wendy stepping out of her dress. She looked up at him with innocent eyes.
What are you waiting for, Will? Musical accompaniment?
And now Riker saw to his shock that all the guests were stripping off their clothes and placing them on the hangers provided.
Is this standard? Yes, Lieutenant. At a Betazoid wedding, the bride, groom, wedding party, and guests all attend nude to symbolize that physically and spiritually there is nothing to hide.
Riker had a feeling that all the blood had drained from his face. Gart tried not to look as amused as he felt.
Lieutenant, if you don't go naked, I assure you, no one will think less of you. Attend the wedding in whatever manner you feel the most comfortable.
He walked away. Wendy looked at Riker chidingly.
Oh, Will, come on. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Do you?
No. I mean, no. It's not dignified.
Well, if you don't want to strip, then fine. At least come on in.
Wendy guided him to an aisle seat about halfway down. He looked around, naked people all around him, all of them looking far more relaxed than he was. He felt as if he were attracting more attention by being clothed.
Excuse me, Wendy. Be right back.
A few minutes later, he returned. Wendy looked up and grinned.
So, Will, I see you decided to join the party after all.
Riker sat down next to her, not precisely sure how to place his bare legs. He was grateful that the seats were cushioned, since cold metal would not have been appreciated right then. Wendy leaned over. "You were right, by the way. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Then she coyly fingered a strand of his chest hair. Riker crossed his legs. At that moment, the ceremony started. The wedding parties entered, and yes, they were naked as well. First the groom, with his father and mother. Then Gart Zerks walked in, with the mother of the bride by his side. And then the bride. She was gorgeous. Her eyes were the most luminous that Riker had ever seen. She held her pointed chin in an almost aristocratic manner, and her dark hair hung in thick ringlets around her head. Her neck was slender, and her figure, well, as they say in old detective novels, her body had the kind of curves that if you were a car, made you want to hug the road. What a crying shame. She was the bride, already spoken for. But then she stepped aside and gestured to a young woman seated in the first row. "I summon you to the place of marriage." At the command, the young woman rose from the audience. She had blonde hair tied back in a white headband. She stepped up to the groom, and they took each other's hands and faced the clergy. That was when Riker realized that the brunette wasn't the bride. She was some sort of equivalent of the maid of honor. Unbidden, uncensored thoughts about getting to know the maid of honor on a variety of levels stampeded through his mind. His eyes drank her in as she stood with her back to him. The lines of her hips, the arch of her spine, the richness of her smile. Her smile, her back was to him, but he could see her smile because she turned her head and was looking at him, right at him, and smiling. And with horror, he realized, oh my God, she knows what I'm thinking. She knows what I'd... She was still smiling at him. Her bosom shook slightly in silent laughter. And then, mercifully, she turned her attention back to the ceremony. Riker didn't hear a word of the rest of the proceedings. He had his own proceedings in mind. A reception had been arranged out in a garden behind the chapel. The guests were now all clothed, to Riker's relief. He kept scanning the crowd for some sign of the maid of honor. There was something about her, almost as if he knew her from somewhere. A burst of applause brought his attention back into focus, and there she was, having emerged with the bride and groom. In a ceremony that was very similar to the Earth tradition of throwing the bouquet, all the unmarried young women lined up as Chandra, the bride, removed her white headband. She tossed it over her shoulder. There was a burst of applause as the maid of honor came up with it triumphantly. Wendy clapped her hands. "Oh, how nice Deanna caught it. She and Chandra have been friends for years." Riker tried to sound casual. "Deanna? Deanna who?" "Deanna Troy. She and Chandra go to the university together. Deanna's a psychology major, I think." "How interesting. And what does catching the white cloth signify? That she's next to get married?" "No, what it means is that the great love of her life is at this gathering." "I see. How romantic." Several days after the wedding, Deanna Troy was walking across campus, lost in thought, when a voice called out behind her, "Hey, hello. I remember you from the wedding." Deanna stopped in her tracks. She couldn't place the voice, but the sense of the person was damned familiar. Then she smiled inwardly and thought, "I should have expected this." The young man walked up to her, sticking out a hand. "We didn't get introduced. I'm Lieutenant William T. Riker." "What does the T stand for?" "Terrific." He waggled his eyebrows slightly to put across that he was making a joke just in case she didn't get it. She got it. But her expression made it clear that she didn't care for it. "I'm new here, and I'm Just trying to get to know as many of the residents as I can. I see. So you're going around and introducing yourself one person at a time. That could take quite a while. It'll take even longer when the people I'm introducing myself to don't even tell me their names. She took his hand and shook it firmly. I am Deanna Troy, and the answer is no. The answer to what? To just about any question you'd care to pose. Look, Lieutenant, we both know you saw me at the wedding. We both know what was going through your mind. And I'm very flattered. Your reaction, however, would indicate an obsession for surface attributes only. To be blunt, Lieutenant, I sense you're someone who thrives on quick encounters, who enjoys the physical side of relationships but shies away from the deeper emotional attachments. Riker stood his ground. Call me Will. For the moment, I believe I prefer Lieutenant. For the moment? Does that mean you anticipate opportunities in the future to address me? Right now, Lieutenant, I'd like to address you to Vulcan and send you out with the next batch of communiques. Oh, how you sting, Miss Troy. To be at the receiving end of your rapier wit. Lieutenant, what will it take to get through to you that I am not interested? Go out with me, Miss Troy. Go out with you. You feel the best way to discourage you is to encourage you? What I feel is that it gives you a chance to make a decision based on something other than first impressions. If we spend time together and you decide you're not interested, then I'll accept that. I don't go where I'm not wanted. She couldn't resist the opening. You must not get around much then, Lieutenant. His eyes narrowed, and then, slowly, he nodded. Fine. Have it your way. He started to turn away from her. Then, to his surprise, she placed a hand lightly on his arm. Pick me up the day after tomorrow at my home, around midday. We'll go on a picnic. I'll pack it. I look forward to it, Miss Troy. She regarded him. Tell me, Lieutenant, there's any number of women around. Why so interested in me? Because I like a challenge? Well, that's splendid. When you come over, I'm sure you'll hit it right off with my mother. She likes challenges, too, and I have a feeling she's just going to adore you. Riker stood outside the mansion that was the home of Deanna Troy and hesitated a moment before rapping on the door. Although he heard no footsteps, the door started to open slowly. Riker looked up and up. A towering man loomed over him. I'm Lieutenant Riker. I'm here to pick up Deanna Troy. This is the Troy residence, isn't it? The giant nodded, stepped back, providing a space for Riker to enter. He studied the looming figure, utterly perplexed. A voice came from behind the giant. I see you've met Mr. Halm. Riker saw an attractive woman with long, dark brown hair and a very aristocratic bearing sweeping towards him. And you're Mrs. Halm? Oh, no. I'm Deanna's mother. Ah, Lieutenant William Riker, ma'am. But please, feel free to call me Will, or William, whichever you prefer. And I should call you? You can call me Mrs. Troy. Oh, well, Mrs. Troy, Deanna and I have an appointment. Yes, I know. She'll be right down, but I thought it would be nice if we had a few minutes to chat. Riker sat down on a couch, sinking unexpectedly into the cushions. Luoxana took a seat nearby that bore a striking resemblance to a throne. Now, Lieutenant, tell me all about yourself.
Mrs. Troy, why don't you tell me about myself?
All right, Lieutenant. You're aggressive, hard-working, dedicated, cautious, and you are extremely attracted to my daughter and have had a variety of sexual fantasies about her, some of which you're hoping to capitalize on today. Your preferred position for intercourse is...
Mrs. Troy.
And what's this about lime-flavored oil rubs?
Mrs. Troy, I must admit, I'm shocked.
You're shocked? Lieutenant, they're your thoughts.
That may be, but it was my understanding that Betazoids prided themselves on courtesy. Your treatment of me here is not particularly courteous.
You're right. Where in the world are my manners? I haven't offered you anything to drink. Mr. Hom.
That's not what I'm referring to. You're speaking like I'm the enemy.
Oh, no, Lieutenant. I think of you as an experience, one that Deanna will encounter, learn from, and grow from. You have to understand, Lieutenant, my daughter is an attentive, intelligent young lady who will inherit from me tremendous responsibilities. There are certain dictates upon her that come with who she is. She accepts and welcomes that. I want you to be considerate of those dictates, and I want you to do nothing that will interfere with her destiny or sense of purpose.
Nothing, meaning?
Nothing, Lieutenant, meaning nothing.
Deanna chose that moment to make her appearance. Riker felt a flash of disappointment. Her long, thick hair was tied up in a small, tight knot. The lines of her shapely figure were hidden under a loose-fitting caftan-like outfit. In front of her, she held a small basket. "Hello, Will." Riker got to his feet. "Deanna, how lovely you look." But Lwaxana interrupted.
Aside from the fact that he hates the dress and the way you're wearing your hair.
Riker fired Lwaxana an angry glance. Deanna was also looking at Lwaxana. "Mother, you suggested the hairstyle and the dress."
Why, so I did. Not too fond of my taste, Lieutenant?
It wouldn't matter if she shaved her head and wore sackcloth and ashes. Deanna would still look lovely. Mother and daughter exchanged a glance, and Lwaxana looked back at Riker.
Very smooth, Lieutenant.
"Thank you." He went to Deanna and gestured toward the front door. She smiled at her mother as they went out. Lwaxana did not smile back. Deanna and Riker were seated up on a grassy knoll overlooking a particularly lovely stretch of Beta Z countryside. The contents of the picnic basket were scattered about the ground around them. "I hope she wasn't too hard on you, Lieutenant." "Oh, nothing I couldn't handle." "What are you grinning about, Deanna? What's so funny?" "Well, it's the way you responded. I asked a question about how something made you feel, and you responded that the situation was within your control. Not everything has to be defined in terms of whether you can handle it or not. Or is control so important for you, Lieutenant?" "Not letting things get out of control is very important. You can't stay in command that way." "Do you think of everything in terms of Starfleet?" "Not everything." He reached across, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled her to him. For a moment he felt her body go limp against him, and he kissed her. He felt something electric pass between them, and then he felt her knee in the pit of his stomach. He gasped, clutching his belly and moaning softly. Deanna smoothed out her dress, and looking utterly composed, reached into the basket and pulled out a brown pastry. "Some dessert, Lieutenant."
Deanna, you didn't have to do that. You could simply have said no.
"I did. I distinctly remember."
You didn't. If you'd have said no, I'd have stopped.
I was sure that I...
You know what, Deanna? You may have thought you did, but you didn't. For a moment there, you allowed yourself to want me. You don't know your own mind, much less mine. Is that a fact? Yes. Well, then just answer me this. Do you want the dessert or not? He shook his head in confusion. That's the question? Even she looked puzzled by it. Yes. No dessert, thanks. Between the meal and your knee, my stomach's pretty much finished for the afternoon. So tell me, once you've got your psychology degree, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. Probably nothing. Nothing? But what about a career? My life is my career. My responsibilities are part of Beta Z tradition. I'm not like you, Will. Many aspects of my life are already set. You know, Deanna, I've already had this conversation with your mother. It's a shame you haven't got a mind of your own. Deanna began shoving all the picnic materials back into the basket. This was stupid. I don't know why I let myself be talked into this. You know what your problem is, Deanna? You're so damned used to studying feelings and thinking about feelings and contemplating feelings that you have no idea of how to just go with feelings. I bet you don't have a romantic bone in your body. The idea of love at first sight would be alien to you. If you ever met your soulmate, you'd probably intellectualize your feelings to death. You'd never follow your impulse. My attitude is different from yours, Will. You always follow your impulses, and they're good ones by and large, I'm sure. You're very confident, and that's a requirement for your career, but it's not the sort of mindset I'm used to. I doubt there's any sort of future for us. He slid closer to her. Then change me, Deanna. You're studying to be a psychologist, to help people. If you think I have emotional shortcomings, then do something about it. I'm perfectly willing to be a guinea pig. She stared at him a moment. You're just hoping this will afford you an opportunity down the road to make love to me. That's right, Deanna, and you're hoping it will too. Secretly, you're grateful for the chance to bring me up to your level so that you can feel better about coming down to mine. He looked at her with such challenge in his eyes that she took his hand and shook it firmly. It's a deal. Prepare to be a guinea pig, Lieutenant Riker. Miss Troy, point me to the maze. Several days later, Deanna was guiding Riker through the Betazoid Museum of Art. Soul music, as Deanna called it, floated through the air. Deanna led Riker through a room lined with abstract paintings. They stopped in front of one that was concentric splashes of red, blue, green, white, black, and a couple of other colors that Riker didn't recognize. Deanna indicated the painting reverently. I come here once a week, every week, and study this painting. I always see new things in it. Now, tell me what you see. Look, maybe we could start with another painting, something that looks like something. Will, you're not even trying. You said you were going to cooperate. He looked at the painting in exasperation. It looked like a jumble of paints. Then he felt two strong fingers at the base of his skull squeezing together and massaging him. Deanna's arm moved in a steady, circular motion. He started to feel tension that he didn't even know he had ebb from him. She spoke in his ear. Now, while you're relaxing, tell me what you see. I see paint swirls, big, goopy paint swirls. She stopped massaging him and stared at him. Goopy? This is a word? Goopy? I'm sorry, I don't have much taste for abstract art. When I look at something, I want it to look like something. Come on, Lieutenant. We're getting out of here. Where are we going?
Back to basics.
The tree towered over them, its trunk brown and gnarled. There were no leaves on it, and its branches seemed to stretch up forever. Deanna climbed it with ease, and Riker quickly followed. At least this was mildly entertaining for him, particularly because he liked the play of Deanna's muscles under her tight clothes. She stopped at a point about 10 feet above the ground. Large branches stuck out in either direction. She sidled out onto one and indicated that Riker should climb out onto the other. Your problem, Lieutenant, is that the demands of your body have too much sway on your mind. Higher emotions are what separate us from the lower orders of life. Higher emotions and table manners. Let me guess. You're going to show me how to separate the needs of my mind from the needs of my body. That's right. Now, I want you to get a solid grip on the branch, just like I'm doing. Then we're going to drop off from the branch and hang on for as long as possible. Riker smirked confidently. Well, I'm obviously stronger than you, Deanna, so if this is some sort of competition... It has nothing to do with muscular strength, Will. Muscles have their limits, but the properly trained mind has none. Ready? And go. They both dropped off the branch and hung there. Sooner or later, your fingers will want to release. Your instinct will be to fight this impulse. Do not fight it. Just ignore it. Focus on something else. Anything else. Riker tried to clear his mind and think about something else. What he wound up thinking about was Deanna, as he had seen her at the wedding, naked and smiling. He imagined her coming towards him, her arms outstretched, which reminded him of his arms, which were really starting to ache. He had no idea how long he'd been hanging there, but he thought he'd lost all feeling above the elbows. With a low muttered curse, he dropped from the branch and landed with a hard thud. Deanna continued to hang there, her eyes closed, her breathing regular. Eventually, she opened her eyes and looked at him. What's the matter, Will? The weight of all those muscles drag you down? Deanna clambered upward, standing on the branch as if she were a tightrope walker. You want to be the big, strong hero type, Will, who thinks he can just whisk the damsel out of danger in his mighty arms. But that attitude doesn't interest me. Her foot slipped, and with a startled shriek, Deanna tumbled off. Riker moved like lightning and caught Deanna before she hit. He dropped to his knees, the shock rattling his teeth. But he still held on to her. You okay? I'm fine. You can put me down. Their faces had been mere inches from each other, and Riker now seized the initiative. He kissed her full on the lips. She just seemed to melt against him, and reflexively her hands squeezed his shoulder blades as if afraid he might vanish, or the moment might end. Then she broke contact and squirmed out of his arms. She tried to pull herself together, but she was obviously still confused over everything that was going through her mind. Quickly, she turned and started to walk off. And Riker cleared his mind and thought of nothing else except what he wanted to do, right at this moment. And then he cut loose in an undisciplined, inelegant burst of thought. You're afraid of me. The reward to his Herculean effort was immediate. Deanna was thrown off step, and her head snapped around in astonishment. She looked right at him, utter shock on her face. To her credit, she recovered immediately, but Riker knew he'd gotten through to her. Hey, Deanna. When's our next lesson? Deanna just kept walking. That night, Riker lay in his quarters reading a primer on Beta Z philosophy. He wasn't able to make heads or tails of it. A friend tells you that she's very upset. Her immediate supervisor has said several overly critical things in regards to her work, and she feels frustrated and hurt over the situation. How do you respond? Will thought about it a moment. Well, I tell her that either she can improve her work habits, or she can tell the supervisor that the criticism is unwarranted. If he continues to be overly critical, and she believes it to have no basis in fact, she can file a grievance up the chain of command. He looked back at the book and read, "Tell your friend that you understand her frustration and that she's not alone, and she can count on you for emotional support." Will shook his head. But what's that going to solve? That won't address the problem of what she's going to do about the situation. This is ridiculous. Suddenly there came an insistent rapping at his door. It opened, and standing there, her eyes bright, was Deanna. "I am not afraid of you. On what grounds do you say that?" "On the grounds that every time you're close to me, you start to lose control. Your body sends you signals that your brain doesn't want to accept." Her gaze was steady and unrelenting. "All right, Lieutenant, come with me. We'll see just who has problems with getting close." It was a fairly warm night. When Deanna stood, she was framed in the moonlight reflecting off a large lake, providing some degree of illumination. Her arms were crossed as if she were cold. Riker stood behind her. "It's nice out here, Deanna. Pretty remote." "That's deliberate." "All right, Will. Take your clothes off." "I beg your pardon?" "It's a therapy technique I learned in class a couple of days ago. Take your clothes off. All of them." "Okay, what's the joke? One of your girlfriends hiding in the woods, I get naked, you guys grab my clothes and run off? Big laugh on the human, right?" Deanna gave a loud sigh and reached around to the back of her tunic. Within seconds, she stood naked in front of Riker and tossed her outfit to him. It landed in a small bundle at his feet. "Take your clothes off, Lieutenant." He did so. They stood nude in the moonlight, and then she walked towards him and gestured that he should lie down. "On your side, your back towards me." He rolled over, tucking his legs up a bit, looking slightly fetal and feeling slightly foolish. He heard motion behind him, and then Deanna was lying next to him. She curled up against him in the manner that humans still called spoons, for the way that spoons fit together when stacked. She slid one arm up under him and brought the other over, wrapping herself around him. She felt incredibly warm against him. He thought he was going to explode. "Now, Will, we're going to talk." His voice was strangled. "Talk?" "Yes. You have to be able to deal with me without thinking about me on a physical level." "And this is supposed to help?" "That's right. You are going to become comfortable with the notion of my sexuality and yours, and then we can move beyond it to more spiritual matters." "Deanna, why in hell are you doing this? I mean, obviously it has no effect on you, but it's making me crazy." One of her hands moved across his chest, and she sounded somewhat frustrated. "It's having an effect on me the same as it's having on you. Don't you see? First and foremost, two people have to connect on an intellectual and spiritual level. I don't want to give in to the impulses I'm feeling. It would undercut everything that I believe in. He began to realize how upset she was. He held her arms tightly against him. Shh. It's okay. I understand. Really. They were silent for a long time after that. He still felt the heat from her and the slow in and out of her breathing. But it wasn't affecting him quite the same way. Okay, I've got something to talk about. This Beta Z philosophy stuff. The example with the woman being criticized by her supervisor. Let me guess. You came up with ways to solve her problem, and the text told you this was the wrong approach. The problem, Will, is that you were being insensitive to her desires. Insensitive? How? I listened to her difficulties and I tried to make her life better, to solve her problem. Well, she wasn't looking for you to solve her problem. What the woman, let's call her Jane, what Jane was looking to you for was an augmentation of her emotional strength. She needed you to say that you were sympathetic to her difficulties and were supportive of her. This is the philosophy of Rabim, which simply translated means, I understand. It was Jane's job to solve the problem or not solve it as she saw fit. She just needed you to let her know that she was not alone. I'm still not sure I get it. Oh, you're starting to. You just haven't admitted to it. I know it's difficult for you, Will. Your impulse is to take command, but command isn't everything. It is to me. It's all I want to do. I want to beat Kirk's record. Who? James Kirk, youngest starship commander in fleet history. That's my goal, to have my own command. Who knows, Will? Someday you might find yourself in a situation where you discover that you enjoy following someone more than you would commanding. Never happen. No matter how much I liked the ship or crew, if I was then offered my own command, I'd be out of there in a heartbeat. You probably wouldn't understand. You're wrong, Will. I do understand. I may not agree, but I understand. So tell me other things about Betazoid philosophy that puzzle you. They remained that way, naked, wrapped around each other, just talking, until the first rays of sunlight stole across the treetops. It had been several days since Riker had seen Deanna. He was having a casual breakfast in a cafe. Seated next to him was Gart Zerks, the father of the bride whose wedding he'd attended the first night on Beta Z. So, Lieutenant, I understand you're seeing Chandra's friend Deanna socially. I've overheard them chatting about it at the university. What were you doing at the university, sir? I'm a professor of psychology there. I even have Deanna in one of my classes. Riker chewed on a fork full of food. Is it the class where they teach nude therapy? Zerks looked at him incredulously. I beg your pardon. Riker began to suspect something. Well, I'd heard that there was this technique where a patient and his or her therapist take off their clothes and lie next to each other, even pressing up against each other. Lieutenant, I'd think that would probably lead to sex. Not necessarily, but why am I explaining this to you? I mean, certainly you know about... Lieutenant, I've never heard of any such technique. I would see little purpose for that sort of contact beyond the obvious gratification. Lieutenant, why are you grinning? Is there something you'd care to discuss with me? No. Nothing at all. I just find the entire thing funny. Oh, excuse me a moment. Riker here.
Lieutenant, this is Sergeant Tang, security. We have a situation on our hands. Sindarine raiders. A ship containing about 10 of them has landed atop the Beta Z Art Museum.
Any hostages, Sergeant?
Yes, sir. We believe about 30 Betazoids remain in the museum.
Scramble the squad. I'll be right there. Within minutes, Riker was standing outside the art museum, where the crowd was milling about in confusion and concern. The Sindarine ship sat atop the museum like a giant spider. While Sergeant Tang had snipers stationed at key points, Riker worked with the squad's communications expert to tap into the Sindarine communications. Within moments, they were listening in as the Sindarine pilot, who had remained with the ship, apprised the raiders inside the museum of what was happening. Riker broke into the middle of their conversation. Attention, Sindarine raiders. You are completely surrounded and cannot escape. Surrender is your only alternative.
Who is this?
Lieutenant Riker of Starfleet. Who is this?
Maror of Sindarine. Keep your people away from my men, Federation man.
Maror, you cannot escape. If you surrender now, your cooperation will be noted.
How nice. That will make a lovely tombstone. Here lies Maror. He cooperated. No thank you, Lieutenant. And if you try and impede our departure, then you can explain the 36 Betazoid corpses to your superiors. Do we understand each other, Lieutenant?
He broke off the communication. Tang turned to Riker. Do we simply let them get away? No, Sergeant, we don't. We try to avoid injuring civilians. But the bottom line is that if they escape, we simply invite them to continue their activities at the expense and lives of other innocent people. It has to stop, here and now. Then they waited. They knew that the Sindarine ship was small. With the crew they already had, plus whatever loot they were taking from the art museum, they wouldn't have much room for hostages. Perhaps one at the most. And to get to their ship, they'd have to come out onto the roof. So all Riker and the security men had to do was wait until the right moment presented itself. The problem was that Sindarine were extremely resistant to phaser blasts. Settings that could stun Sindarine could injure, even kill other humanoids. So the marksmen would have to aim carefully to avoid hitting any prisoners the Sindarine might have with them. If the Sindarine did manage to make it to their ship, Sergeant Tang was prepared. He had with him the formidable Level 10 shoulder-mounted phaser cannon Model 2. He claimed that on full power, it could knock a Beta Z moon out of orbit. From the size of it, Riker had no reason to doubt him. Suddenly, Sergeant Tang jumped to attention. They're coming out, sir. One by one, the Sindarine appeared on the rooftop, heading for their ship and safety. They were carrying crates, no doubt filled with priceless Betazoid art. Riker was waiting until all 9 were visible before he ordered his men to open fire. And then the final member of the raiding team appeared. He was cradling a blaster in his right hand. His left arm was curled around the throat of a woman. A horrified Riker recognized her instantly. Oh, no. No, not Deanna. Riker knew what he had to do. The vast majority of the hostages were in the clear. Only one was left, one who might still survive if it all fell right. But if they made no move, then the raiders would escape, and more people would pay down the line. But Deanna's life was on the line. At that moment, Deanna was swung directly into Riker's sightline, and she looked straight at him, straight and proud and unafraid. 2 words rang in his head.
I understand.
Riker gave the order, take them. From all around, phasers blasted outward, enveloping the Sindarine in coronas of energy. Several staggered and went down. 2 managed to withstand the barrage and make it to the ship. and one of them was the Cinderine who was dragging Deanna. He reached the ship and shoved Deanna inside ahead of him. The hatch rampway closed. With a roar of impulse engines, the ship lifted into the air. The hard-bitten Sergeant Tang had swung the phaser cannon onto his shoulder and activated it. "I can blow them out of the sky, Lieutenant. Quick and fast." "Could you cripple them, Sergeant?" "It's trickier. And there's no guarantee the woman will survive the crash. You may not be doing her any favors." "I know. Cripple them." Tang made an adjustment and fired. The power of the phaser blast was beyond anything Riker had ever experienced directly. The air crackled around him. The blast took out the starboard engine and navigational instrumentation of the ship. It lurched wildly, tried to regain control, and failed. It spiraled downward, leaving a trail of thick black smoke behind it, miles long. Riker watched it go with a feeling of dread. "Sergeant, in your estimation, where's it going to come down?" "Judging from the speed and trajectory, Lieutenant, somewhere in the Jalara jungle. You know, Lieutenant, if she makes it through the crash, she has a good chance. The jungle has its dangers, mud pits and such, but there are a few really dangerous animals to contend with." "You're forgetting the most dangerous animals, Sergeant. They're the ones steering the ship."